Hey, it's Heidi Rain. Welcome back for another episode of Addiction and Codependency Breakthrough. Man, am I glad you're here today. We are going to attempt, I'm going to attempt, who's we, right? Me and my multiple personalities are going to attempt to unpack one of the things that I hear the most often from the clients I work with, from the people that I help. And it's this frustration with the notion that just a simple I'm sorry is supposed to be enough. Now, if you're here, I'm going to assume that you have been subject to somebody who's toxic in your life, whether that be how you grew up with a dysfunctional or toxic parent, narcissistic, abusive, addicted, or if you are in relationship with somebody that has caused a lot of damage because of their drinking or using or toxicity or dysfunction or whatever have you. And what you're used to hearing is, I'm sorry. You're used to hearing, I'm sorry, especially if you're in a cycle of abuse where there's this, they hurt you and then they do this like scramble and hustle to hoover you back in or to smooth it all away, go back in the honeymoon phase. And we have other videos here on the cycle of abuse. And I'm happy to make more of those videos if you can understand, because it doesn't have to be just this physical thing, right? Being on the emotional and psychological roller coaster with somebody who's not well, whether they're addicted or psychologically unwell, is just as abusive as if they were hitting you, physically. So and maybe that's happening too. And if it is, I just want to recommend that if you're in an abusive relationship of any kind, that you seek help. You go to the helpline.org, you talk about taking the steps to get out. And so what I'm more talking about is when we're on the path to wellness and recovery and healing, and somebody is attempting to be better and they are giving you the I'm sorry, but you're still stuck. And you can't quite articulate why I'm sorry isn't enough. And you want to be able to articulate that because the people that are saying sorry to you might mean it. They might want you to just, pretend like nothing happened and just go back to normal. But you and I both know that's not possible. So I'm going to attempt today to make sense of that for you. Why is it that I'm sorry is not enough? Why do you need more? And is it okay for you to want more? Because I'm going to tell you what I know from my own life experience and from the thousands of people that I helped. The one thing that we question and ask ourselves all the time as people who've been impacted by another person's toxicity or dysfunction is we're like, is this normal? Is it okay for me to be mad? Am I justified? Is this person as bad as I think they are? Do you see what I'm seeing? We ask ourselves all these questions. And so I'm going to attempt to, man, I don't even know how this is going to go. I haven't really prepared other than, hey, this is what I want to talk about today. So let's just see what happens in this discussion. And I'm going to use some real moments from my own life, raw and real situations that I've had in my life and why I'm sorry is not enough from both sides. We're going to tackle this from being the victim of somebody else's, like, we always say that the victim of somebody else's internal war with themselves and all the shrapnel. So if you've been on the receiving end of this, of somebody sorry why it's not enough, and also if you've inflicted pain on somebody else and why your I'm sorry is not enough, and how to, because I've been on both sides. I've been the receiver of pain and I've been the inflictor of pain. And the important thing is to recognize not one of us is free from not doing both, right? We are all capable on the spectrum of receiving pain and dishing it out. And part of the healing process is to be able to really understand not just the result of having pain inflicted upon you, but the result of you inflicting pain upon other people as well. And so hopefully this is a really balanced discussion. Now, of course, if you want more, you can always go over to HeidiRain.com where I have you covered. Okay. So if you've been impacted by infected or impacted by somebody else's toxicity, I have a program for recovery, for toxic relationship recovery. That is amazing. I have monthly workshops on different topics like should I stay or should I go, how to heal, how to get off the crazy train of relationships, how to knock sense into an addict or talk sense into an addict. I have you covered, and it's my life's mission and work to serve this population of people impacted by another's addiction and dysfunction. So go to HeidiRain.com at any time if you want to sign up for the next workshop. Spots are limited. Secure your spot. I'll put all the links below. per usual, if you're listening to the podcast, the link should be there as well. So let's dive into this. Let's just like, you know what? We're just going to go head first and we're going to see what happens. When I was growing up, I had a reason that I was so self-destructive at the ready. I was one of these people that was either really successful in my life and firing on all cylinders and had everything together, or I was like a shit show and nothing in between. I was either awesome or I sucked. My first part of my life was like, I'm succeeding or failing, and I am epically doing either, and there is no in between. Either I was really successful at relationship or successful in work and making money, but my relationship sucked. Like I couldn't make my life work on all cylinders and all levels. And when you would ask me why, I was at the ready. I would say, it's because of what I grew up around, man. No, nobody, I grew up in a shit show. Nobody showed me how to really take care of myself or love myself or be in a healthy relationship. And I had all the reasons why I was dysfunctional and why I was, not as successful in all these other areas of my life as I wanted to be. And I had this fantasy as a kid. I thought that if the person or people that was responsible for my pain would just acknowledge the pain and recognize how much pain they had inflicted on me, that suddenly that would be like the magic moment. The sky would part, Jesus would come down, pat me on my head and go, child, you're healed. Amen and hallelujah. And thank God that's over with. And I have come to since learn I'm not the only one with this fantasy. When I was on after my healing journey, I started working in treatment and working in recovery and helping thousands of clients. And for a long time, almost about a decade, I worked inside of one of the world's leading drug and alcohol treatment centers as a coach, as a teacher, as a facilitator of the family program. And I can't tell you how many thousands of people I've sat with, and hundreds have said the same thing, that they just want the so and so to take responsibility. Man, if my mom would just take ownership from what she did to me, then I wouldn't need to drink anymore. I would be healed. If my dad would just acknowledge that he wasn't a dad and wasn't a father and everything he did, then I know that my life would change if they just accepted responsibility. So we're not alone in thinking that. There's so many of us that are having pain inflicted upon us that think that the magic moment of our healing is when they just own it. Right. And you might be saying that now, maybe not from your childhood, but you're in a relationship with an addict, an alcoholic, or a narcissist, or somebody else who's toxic. And you're like, man, if they would just recognize how much they're hurting me and go, you know what? I think I'm an asshole. I see the light here. I'm inflicting pain on you. Wow. Thanks, Susan. I had no idea what an asshole I was. And now I see all the hurt and pain I've caused you. And that's going to be the moment when the alcoholic or addict or narcissist takes responsibility. And you're going to go, ta da, I'm healed. I feel better. My life has changed. And, we all have this fantasy. So I remember wanting this moment in particular in my life. I had a lot of different traumatic experiences, but one of them was, I talk about this sometimes, and I'm talking about it more as time goes on, when I believe it's helpful, not to throw anybody under the bus, not to hurt anybody, but just to give this thing some kind of context for us to really understand. As a young girl, I've said before, my first hater was my own mom. And I don't know what it was. I rubbed her the wrong way. Okay. I couldn't breathe the right way. Everything I did. And I know she just had her own struggles and her own issues, but so much of my life was like, as a teenager and as a little kid, just wanting her to see how bad she was hurting me, holding on to my pain and thinking, man, if she just knew, if she could see and own it, that she's hurting me physically, psychologically, emotionally. Long story short, one day when I was in my 20s, I remember it plain as day. I was, uh, uh, you know, successful from the outside looking in. I'd been traveling around and doing the thing, and I was visiting her and sitting on her bed and up in her bedroom. And she looked at me and she said, I'm so sorry for every time I ever hit you or hurt you or made you feel bad about yourself. And that was the first time that she apologized. She had apologized other times, like it all vacillated between, I didn't hurt you, that wasn't that bad, and I see what I did. There was another time where she was like really owning it. And she told me this story about how when I was this was like the moment I thought the night on the bed where she told me this stuff, I thought that's going to be the moment where I'm going to be freed and break through and feel like and not keep hurting myself on purpose. You know what I mean? At the time I was like binge drinking and self-destructive, but I was like if I get this apology, I'm going to be healed and I'm no longer going to be self-destructive or unhappy or anxious or depressed. And she did the apology thing. And I think I went out 2 nights later and got completely annihilated and ended up not knowing where I was. So that wasn't the cure, but I was like, well, maybe I need a deeper apology. Maybe I need a deeper recognition of the pain. And so several years later, I was living in Florida. I was working in treatment and we had another kind of holy moment. She was standing in my kitchen and she was crying. She was devastated. She said, Heidi, I remember when you were a little girl and you were about 6 years old and you were terrified of me. You were terrified. And you would ask me to go outside and you would always duck and always like cover your hands up over your head. And you would ask me, can I, can I go outside? And you were afraid of me. And I knew, this is my mom telling me, I knew that you were terrified of me. And I promised myself every time when I would see the terror in your eyes that that would be the last time that I would ever hit you or hurt you or do that to you. And then she said, as she's weeping, but I just couldn't help myself. Now, for me, in that moment, I had been working in addiction. I was like, wow, that makes perfect sense. Like, she was addicted. I get it. I see the light now. Like, she was addicted to that strategy of blackout rage, and she was blind to her own pain and couldn't see the trauma that she was inflicting, and probably doesn't remember a lot of the stuff because she wasn't home. So in that moment, I think I had not a level of healing for myself, but a deeper understanding of why that stuff went down. Now I'm thinking, well, great. Here's my second holy moment. She finally gets it. She sees all the damage she did. She gets it. She understands I must be totally healed. And now I'm free from all the trauma. All the trauma has left me because I get that apology. And I think that at the end of the day is that thought we're thinking. When the ownership comes, the trauma disappears. This is the biggest lie that we can tell ourselves. You and I both, I had to, and I believe you will need to understand that somebody's ownership of what they've done to you is irrelevant in your path to healing. It's nice if you can get it. If you get a self aware person that can be like, hey, man, I see all the shit I did. I'm so sorry. Amen and hallelujah. Good for you. But it is not necessary for your healing, nor is it the magic cure to your healing. I'm sorry is not enough. Because even in that ownership of that moment, we have to sit back as the receivers of the pain, as the recipients of the traumatic experiences. And we have to say, well, they owned it, but I'm still a little effed up. I still have all this, what I call that shrapnel from being in this dynamic. Like I still have trust issues. I still am like a vault man. I can't open up to people. I don't want to be vulnerable. You know what? I still have control issues. I feel like I need to be in control of everything and everything all the time. I still have emotional issues. I can't regulate. I'm either balls to the wall, freaking out, or shut down and nothing in between. I still have all this shrapnel. And so even if the apology comes, you are still, as a recipient of all those experiences, responsible for your healing. Now, many of you don't even realize the impact that you've been affected because you are warriors. You have been on the path to like suck it up, buttercup, man. You've got your marching orders. Yeah, a bunch of stuff happened, but hey, everybody did the best they could. And here I am now, and I'm all moved on and I'm happy as can be. But outside looking in, you look like you're successful. You look like you have all your stuff together, but on the inside, you're still struggling at the end of the day with feelings of not being enough, fear of being found out, that you have imposter syndrome, even though you are successful. You're like, I don't know, or you're super successful. You're doing all the things and running the companies and doing all the stuff, but your relationship behind closed doors is a hot freaking mess on a crazy train. And you're like, that's the stuff that is the residue and shrapnel from that relationship, even though the I'm sorry came, is still now what? your responsibility and my responsibility to deal with. That's why I created the courses I created. That's why I created one of my signature course. It's called Life School, Love Yourself First Empowerment School. And it's where we unpack the shrapnel. And a lot of people, you know what? It's not wildly successful. I don't have thousands of people going through my program because very few people are like inclined to do that level of a deep dive into themselves and go, I want to root this up, man. I want to get rid of this once and for all. Most of the people who do it are people who want to help other people. They're coaches and their hearts or therapists, or they work with people and they want to be in integrity. They want to be, have their stuff dealt with before they're helping other people, really. So if you're on the receiving end, just know it's, if the person inflicted pain on you and they say to you, but I told you I was sorry and you accepted my apology, and maybe they're saying that stuff to you right now. Why can't you just move on? I told you I was sorry. If it is your parent or it's a person that it's still in relationship with, and they're like, what the hell, like, how long are we going to be here? That was 20 years ago or forever ago. And I apologized and you accepted my apology. You have to know that it is not enough. And it is still going to hurt. And you're still going to have to do that walk back to that healing because damage was done no matter how sorry somebody is. It's like at a murder trial when somebody's like, you know what, I'm really sorry. I don't know what I did there. They're still dead. And there are parts of you that were killed along the way as well that need to be resurrected and reborn. So, right, we're impacted. In fact, I don't know if you could see behind me. We don't talk about this that much, but over here on my wall, which way am I going here? Over here on my wall is a book that I wrote. I blew it up. I don't know if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it. It's a book called What's Wrong with Me. There's a picture of a little girl on a couch, and that's a book I wrote. You can find it on Amazon. I'll put the link in here. It's a children's book written for adults to understand the impact of growing up in dysfunction, abuse, addiction on their adult relationships and their adult life. And it explains codependency. I think it's a brilliant book, not because I wrote it, but because it's explaining such a complex thing as the impact of trauma and codependency, how it develops in such a simple way that you could read that book and go, oh, yeah, I can relate to that. I wrote it for people to use as a tool in therapy, for therapists to use it with their clients to get them to open up and recognize and talk. But you please go get it. It's an amazing resource for you to understand the impact of addiction on your life. And also, if you want to support the book, you can also purchase books. Excuse me, let me know, and we'd be happy to gift those books to treatment centers and on and on. So I digress. Not really, this is on topic, but because we think we survived, we got on with our lives, we think, thank God that's over with, but it's not over with. And if you don't understand the level of impact on you of somebody else's toxicity, you end up taking that toxicity out on other people. That old saying, if you don't heal what hurts you, you'll bleed on those who didn't cut you. And that is what we do as survivors of trauma. When we don't recognize the impact, we think we should be over it, but here we are erupting in our marriages, acting out with our kids, yelling, being the people we didn't think we were going to be because we have this stuff that needs to be taken care of. Okay. Now, let's move over to not being the recipient of the pain, but the inflictor of the pain. And this is harder for us to go, I guess I'm sorry is not enough. We want, when we're over here on this side of inflicting the pain, we want I'm sorry to be enough. You know what I mean? Like, hey, can I just say I'm sorry? When somebody works a program and they get to the amends part, and they're like, hey, I inflicted some pain on you. I'm sorry about that. I was in my alcoholism or my addiction, and even the actor alcoholic really, we as the offenders could be like, I'm sorry to be enough. But we don't even remember as addicts or alcoholics the shrapnel we caused. When somebody's out to lunch and you're in your addiction, and I'm speaking from my own experience, my binge drinking issue, I didn't remember the things that I did. And so my husband and I recorded an episode of our podcast, Love Revolution, where we help couples that are trying to stay together and work this thing out. And I was asking him, I said, hey, am I drinking? The whole first year of our relationship, I was a binge drinker. And I asked him on the podcast episode, I was like, how did that impact you? What was that like? And he was sharing for me. And if you're not like working at your own recovery and your wellness, it's hard to hear how you've hurt other people or the impact you've created on their lives. But if you want to resolve it, and you want to rectify it, you have to be brave enough to cultivate the mental capacity and the emotional bandwidth to hold somebody else's pain that you inflicted. Right? So we get to sit with our partners and say, can you tell me how I hurt you? And brace ourselves and be ready to hear it without rationalizing it, minimizing it, justifying it, sweeping it under the rug. We like saying, well, I only did that because I was under the influence, or I only hurt you because that wasn't really me, or I don't really remember that, or it's a new day, I'm a new person. And all the tactics that we do to try to like minimize our own discomfort of being inside of somebody else's pain that we inflicted. But it's necessary for us to sit inside of that pain we inflicted and hold the space for another person so that we can see ourselves clearly. We are not innocent. We have all inflicted pain. We have all played parts. And so it's really important for us to have that balance and perspective. Like, just as much as I can see the pain that, my mom inflicted on me, I could see pain I inflicted on her too. I can see that very clearly, all the things that I did and said and ways I acted out and all of that. And so, but at the end of the day, here's what we're looking at as a relationship. We're saying, okay, if I'm sorry is not enough, and I know I have to heal on my own. I know it's my responsibility to heal. It's also my responsibility to be able to hear and be brave and hear and have courage about the pain that I inflicted. The only reason to actually uh, reunite, and try to work this through, if you are a couple and you want to say there's why I'm sorry is not enough, is because there's enough love there. There's enough good in this dynamic that you want to hear that other person's side, right? That you want to go in and take their responsibility and work at the marriage. And Doug and I'll link the podcast episode to this about why I felt like the need to make a solo episode on addiction and codependency breakthrough, because I think that what I see all the time is people in recovery looking at their partners and saying, I said I was sorry. Isn't that enough? I know I hurt you. Can we move on? I'm sober now. It's a new day. But the truth is, you're still hurting. And that's really who I made this for, is the people that are impacted, not the people that are hurting. So for you, number one, you need to have a better understanding of how that addiction or that toxicity has impacted you, so that you can articulate it more clearly instead of saying, I don't know why I'm sorry, it's just not enough. I just, you blame yourself, or you're like, I don't know why I can't move past it. I don't know why I still hold on to this. Well, there's a damn good reason. It's because that is shrapnel, and that stuff is deep. The impact of addiction and dysfunction and narcissism and toxicity on your life is monumentally humongous. Okay. So I want to help you become conscious of that shrapnel and then help you remove it one piece at a time. So we're going to start with you. We're going to start with you that are the receivers of people's pain. And then eventually, Doug and I, my husband and I, have a group that we have. We have seminars, we have courses to learn how to hold the space as a couple, to talk about the pain we inflicted on one another. But for now, that's why we call our program Love Yourself First Empowerment. You first have to remove the speck from your own eye before you remove the speck from other people's eye. You have to take care of yourself first, understand your trauma, your pain, and then you can be the container to go down the road of hear other people's, and how you inflicted pain and all of that. All right. So if you want to take that first step and go, yeah, Heidi, I'm curious. I want to know, how have I been impacted? Why do I keep getting sucked into these crazy relationships? Why can't I just seem to why isn't I'm sorry enough? Why am I still carrying this stuff around? Then I encourage you to go over to HeidiRain.com right now and sign up for my next monthly workshop, whatever that workshop is, because I know it was made for you. It was made for you. Okay. So I love you. Take excellent care of yourself, and I'll see you really soon in another episode. And always leave your comments, share, subscribe. Let me know if this is helpful in the comments and how so. And hopefully I'll see you on a more intimate basis inside of one of my live virtual workshops. See you soon. Bye-bye.